I'm Haleigh Ryan Hurst, the 2022 Miss Oklahoma Teen USA, here for my pageant project interview.
Hello, everyone. I'm here with my special guest, Haleigh Ryan Hurst, who was Miss Oklahoma Teen USA. We're running a bit late only because we started chatting before we went live. But hey, Haleigh, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Now, we have a bunch of people who've already jumped on. So, guys, if you haven't watched my interviews before, if you have any questions or messages of support for Haleigh, put them in the comments and I will pass them on. But I guess first things first, you just handed over your title. So what's life been like over the past when was Miss Oklahoma USA? Was it a week ago?
Yes, it was a week ago on Sunday, so a little bit over a week ago. And I'm back in the swing of school. I feel like school has been so ongoing for me. I'm taking 23 hours this semester, and the college average is 15. So I've definitely overloaded my boat this semester, just trying to cram in all of my classes so I can graduate with a dual degree in public relations and political science pre-law. So just keeping up with homework has been a struggle, but we're surviving. We are surviving.
I think sometimes people forget that even people who are teen title holders actually have to do like the mundane homework. But how has life been for you over the last week or two? Has it been a struggle fitting back into normal life, or do you have so much going on that it's just okay, that was then, and now we're moving on to other things?
I feel like I haven't really processed everything. I've had so much going on from assignments, and I launched my personal podcast next week. So, getting everything aligned with that and just keeping up with social media. I will say the good part about no longer being a title holder right now is not having another social media to wrangle in, try to schedule posts. So, that part has been really awesome because I'm honestly not a huge fan of social media. So, getting to take a step back from social media and only just keeping up with the things that I actually want to keep up with has been
Okay.
really awesome for me and my mental health personally. So I've just haven't had time to process everything, but it is a little weird no longer being a teen title holder.
Gotcha. Let me ask you a couple of things. So first off, you said that you've got your own podcast dropping. So let's dig into that. What is your upcoming podcast? What's it called? How can people find it? And what's it going to be about?
Yeah, so it's called Hangin with Haleigh, and it's a passion project that I started this semester because I realized I was so busy, I wasn't getting any me time in, and so I've always wanted to start a podcast. So I was like, there's no better time than now. So I've been taking a lot of classes over podcasts and watching a lot of YouTube videos. I have a couple mentors who have been helping me, but it's about what it's like to be a young woman in today's society, and I've broken things up into 6-week episodes. 6-week series. So there'll be 2 episodes a week. There'll be one in the beginning of the week that's just me talking, introducing the topic of the week, talking about my personal experiences with it. And then towards the end of the week, I will have a guest on my podcast and we'll be talking about how their professional life either correlates with that topic or something that they've personally been through that correlates with that topic. And it's mainly just to show that yes, being a young woman in today's society is so much fun, but we go through so much. And so giving that advice to people who usually wouldn't have that advice or have that big sister to tell them. I've always kind of told people I'm everyone's unofficial big sister. I feel like I have a lot of younger friends who look up to me. And so being able to, make this live and to make this a national thing on Apple Podcasts and Spotify has been so fun. So everything launches on Tuesday of next week, which I'm very, very, very excited about.
What sort of topics will you be covering? Because it's interesting you mentioned the sort of unofficial big sister, because I looked at your website and I think that's almost like the tagline. That's the first thing you see is welcome, to my website. I'm your unofficial big sister. So what sort of topics will you be digging into hanging with Haleigh?
Yeah, so in May, we are going to start a whole mental health episode since it's Mental Health Month. So it will be a 6-week series, and I'll be talking to multiple different professionals about mental health and how to stay mentally healthy, but also the negative effects of the whole self-help era that we're in and how that's not really helping our mental health. So calling out a lot of the hypocrisies that surround it, but also, giving people the proper tips to equip themselves. And then I go straight into a little sorority life 6-week series. And then I have a physical health 6-week series. And then I have a how to do sorority rush 6-week series coming up. So I have a little bit of everything, a little bit of college life, a little bit of real life and personal life that a lot of adults can also take from, because I wanted to make sure my podcast was really inclusive to not just, young women listening to it, but teens coming up or even people outside of college in their older years.
Anyone older than you, which is a lot of people because you're still very young. You've raised a very interesting topic. I don't want to gloss over it. So you talked about self-help and some of the problems that we have in the self-help era. Now that's very interesting because I started off as a self-help, let's call it a self-help junkie. But what I found was that it's not actually as helpful as I think a lot of people would like to proclaim that it is. And some of those people, it's because they sell self-help books and self-help courses. So, you can understand that. But sometimes, and I want to get your opinion on this because this is very interesting to me, sometimes I feel that it doesn't really tell the truth. And I think sometimes when you're in a hard position, hiding from the truth is the worst thing you can do. Now, it can be hard to hear the truth sometimes, but I would rather, and I value in my friendship group, I would value someone telling me the truth tactfully. I don't need them to be, a jerk about it, but I want someone to tell me the truth. I don't want someone to tell me everything's okay when it's not. And I don't want someone to tell me that everything I'm doing is great when it's not.
It's not.
So that's just where I go off on the self-help sort of tangent. When you say the self-help and the issues that you have with it, is that what you're talking about, or do you have are you attacking it, or not attacking it, but are you taking a different tact on it?
I'm taking a different tact on it. I read this book after graduating high school that kind of opened my eyes to the toxic self-help era that we've entered, and it's called You're Not Enough, and That's Okay by Ali Stuckley. She's a Christian author. Growing up, I grew up in a Christian household. I have a great faith with the Lord above, and so I thank a lot of him for all of the blessings I've had. But one thing I wasn't realizing was I was putting so much of my, existence into material things, and really relying on, I'm beautiful just the way I am. And yes, that's so true. You are beautiful just the way you are. God made you in a very specific way. However, if you want to change something that you don't like about yourself, be empowered to make that change. Because I feel like in today's society, we almost, we judge young women for changing things on their bodies or their speech that they didn't like. I had a severe speech impediment from the time I was born until 7th grade, and I hated my speech. I refused to talk at one point because I was just constantly bullied for it. So then I went to speech therapy. I was able to fix my speech impediment in 6 months when therapists told me it would take 2 years. I've broken my nose 4 times. My senior year of high school, I had my nose completely reconstructed because my septum was deviated in 2 places. I have veneers on my front 4 teeth because my brother knocked my 2 front teeth out with a baseball bat when I was 9. So I've made these changes to myself because it makes me feel more confident in myself. And I feel like I'm able to empower other people around me whenever I am most empowering to myself. And I think that's something that we don't realize today is we don't, take those necessary steps to make sure that we're okay. And we're all like, it's all self-help. We're doing fine. Everything's okay. But in reality, it's not. And it's okay not to be okay. And that's one thing I really love about this mental health movement that we've seen over the past 2 years is people are starting to say it's not okay. It's okay to not be okay, because we're having a lot more difficult conversations. With the rise of technology, I feel like we haven't had these difficult conversations before. And so being able to have them or bring them back face to face, like pre-technology era, I think has really helped us, but it's also hindered us in the way that we communicate with each other.
Well, I'd absolutely agree with that. And there are studies out there now that show that social media is objectively bad, particularly for young women's mental health, mainly because of the comparison. It naturally engenders. You're looking through and you're automatically going, well, I'm not as pretty as her. And, this person's out having a holiday. That person's out, doing this with a giant boat. That person's got a sports car. and it just makes you
Exactly.
feel bad about yourself. But let me just bring you back to another topic, because you said that you actually don't really like social media, which is interesting. Now, I'm with you on that. For me personally, I see social media as having immense value, like as a tool. But
Oh,
then
absolutely.
I'm not going to tell everyone that, oh, it's absolutely great and there's no downsides to it, because I think that would be a lie, at least from my perspective. So tell me about your opinion on social media. And then obviously, because you were a major title holder, Miss Oklahoma Teen USA, and you cracked top 16, if I'm not wrong, at Miss Teen USA. And obviously, a lot of pageantry in this day and age, particularly because of the pandemic, it's all social media based. So tell me more about social media and your take on it.
I think social media is an amazing marketing tool if you are trying to market yourself as a brand or trying to market a product. As a PR student, I have learned a lot about what works on social media, what doesn't work on social media, all the ups and downs to it, everything from a business side, but also personal side. But for
Mm-hmm.
me personally, I hate social media because I don't leave social media feeling great about myself, and I don't leave social media feeling like I've bettered anyone, honestly, because social media is not reality. And that's something I love to preach to people, because we look at, Kim Kardashian and Taylor Swift, and we put them on on idolizing stages. But at the end of the day, they're human too. And we put so much pressure on people to keep up their beauty standards and to keep up everything that makes them popular. Like, we can take Alex Earl on TikTok. She has gotten immensely popular in a very short amount of time. I
Mm-hmm.
can only imagine the stress that girl is under right now, trying to make sure that she stays on top of posting. And then that in itself becomes a full-time job. And then you second guess posting what you love, because you're trying to post what gets the most views, what
Yep.
gets the most likes. I started not caring about my likes on my social media. It used to be, if
Mm-hmm.
my photo didn't hit 1,000 likes, I immediately went and deleted it. Like, that is
Yep.
so toxic, because then you don't get to post what you're actually passionate about and what you actually love to do, because who cares if someone likes it and who cares if someone doesn't like it? You know, at the end of the day, if it's something that you're expressing yourself, I'm all for it. However, for me as a social media title holder, I was able to, on Sundays, take the time to plan out what I was going to post that week, put it in an
Mm-hmm.
app that would post it for me. So then I didn't even have to worry about it the rest of the week, because it immediately posted everything I wanted it to post. And I didn't have to look on that social media. I didn't have to read nasty comments, because that's another whole thing.
Oh, yes.
Cyberbullying has
Yep.
really risen with social media, and that's just another downside to social media, is people can be trolls and they don't have to put their name on it. Instead of saying something to someone's face or saying it on their social media, it's
Mm.
they put up these fake accounts. I
Yep.
think my dad taught me a very valuable lesson when I was young, and it was, if you can't say it to someone's face, you shouldn't be saying it at all. And that's something that I've really carried with me,
Mm-hmm.
especially being a title holder on social media and being a person of influence, because you never know who's watching. You never know what little girl might see those comments. You never know what will come back and bite you in the butt when you're older either. So just like keeping a clean social media is hard now, especially with TikTok, when every song, every popular song has cuss words or inappropriate dance
Mm.
movements. So just trying to keep it clean, I feel like, is an even bigger struggle now on social media.
I mean, there's so many ways to go wrong on social media, aren't there? Sometimes it just feels it's not worth it, and it'd almost be better just to go back to a day and age where before we had it. Um, but let me ask you this, because I know that you're interested in politics. So over here in Australia at the moment, we're debating in terms of social media taking away kids' phone. Well, not taking away, but kids when they're in school, when they go into class, they have to take their phones and put it, it's not confiscated, they have to put it, let's say, in a box at the front
Yeah,
of the class, just so that during class,
they
they
can
can't
focus.
access their phone. Now, I studied to be a teacher and I have coached tennis, so I know what it's like to be an educator. And certainly, if I was coaching someone, if I was teaching a class, I would not want those kids to have their phone. I don't see it necessary at all, because they certainly wouldn't be looking up something that I'm teaching them. They'd be on their social media or looking at something else. Yet it's a debate. It's over here. It's not a clean cut. Some people are saying, "Oh, you can't take away people's stuff. Right to property and right to privacy." Which I'm like, okay, but we're not stealing their phones. We're just putting it
No.
in front of the class during school time. So let me ask you this: in terms of young children or young women, whichever way you want to go, and social media and phones in a school setting, so not college setting where you're an adult and you make your own choices for better or worse, but in school, what would you think is an appropriate use of phones or social media? What would you like to see?
When I was in high school, I had to put my phone in a pocket as soon as I walked into every single class. So I was not allowed to have my
Wow.
phones at all. And I think that's something that should be implemented in every schools because phones hinder your learning ability. You see that notification pop up, you immediately
Mm,
want to check it. I like to call my generation, we're screenagers. So we're so connected to our phones and we're so connected to our screens that if something happens on it, that's the only thing we can focus on. Or if something
yep.
goes wrong, it's the end of the world, Title I meltdown. So I'm all for having, kids put their phones up in schools, take this time to learn and educate themselves. Literacy rates have gone down over the past 10 years. And I do attribute a lot of that to technology. And because it's so much easier to type than it is to write a whole essay, it's so much easier
Mm,
to use voice text to text for you. And I'm a victim of voice text. I do love voice text. Instead of like actually learning proper grammar. And so I think that's something that's really important and people don't pay enough attention to because now we have apps like Grammarly or Spanish Translate. So we don't
mm.
need to necessarily learn foreign language or learn how to have proper grammar because we don't use it anymore. We have software that fixes it for us, and I truly think that does not make us smarter as a nation or even like on a worldwide scale when you have all of these extra tools instead of sitting down in class learning it from scratch and then building from there.
You raise another topic that I'm quite passionate about, which is things like Grammarly. And I throw spell check and all those things into
Yes,
that. When I was writing essays for school, which was a while ago, to be clear, but we had to check it ourselves. And I took a certain amount of pride in that because I want to get it right. And it takes more effort to get it right than it does to get it wrong, like anything in life. And then spell check came out. And I was like, oh, I don't really like this because you're not going to have to learn to do it yourself. And then grammar check came out, and that was even worse. The worst part was when it would correct my stuff and it would correct it incorrectly.
exactly.
So, right. And then Grammarly came out and starts boasting about, oh, you could get a better job by doing. And look, if you have issues with it, I'm sympathetic to it. But at the same time, I do think that you need to learn how to do it yourself. If you just are completely reliant on technology to do it for you, then there's some part that's missing in your understanding that's really, really going to hurt you at some point later on, and probably in quite a bad or catastrophic way. So when it comes to things like Grammarly or spell check or grammar correct, especially when it corrects you when it gets it wrong and you didn't, what is your opinion on all this sort of technological, I don't know, these inventions?
I personally don't like Grammarly. I tried to use it my freshman year of college, and it ended up messing up a lot of my papers for me to the
Yeah.
point where I would have to go and completely rewrite full paragraphs because Grammarly would just go through and mess up the whole structure of the sentence. And that's not
Yep.
what I learned. However, I did grow up in a very rural, small town in Texas where I wasn't necessarily taught great ways on how to spell and putting
Mm.
my grammar together. So that's something I had to learn as I got older. And when I moved schools, it was a whole new focus because everyone could, spell these really difficult words when I was still struggling, spelling words and communicating. And so I will say spell check has helped me tremendously, but I also use it
Sure.
whenever I use it, I learn how to spell that word. It's not like I
Yeah.
just immediately
Yep.
just click it and mindlessly like a lot of people. I feel like there's always a learning opportunity in everything. And that's something my grandma and my grandpa have really taught me. My grandma was a teacher and then a principal, and then went on to teach teachers how to teach kids who live in poverty. And then my
Mm.
grandpa was a teacher to principal to superintendent. So I've come from a long
Wow.
line of educators, and I know
Yeah.
how important education is, especially in the basis of elementary school. So I feel like honestly, education as a whole needs to start doing better, especially here in the United
Mhm.
States, of building a better foundation in elementary schools and building from there.
Now, let's get on to education because I know it's something that you're extremely passionate about, as am I. I have interviewed an Oklahoma teacher before, so I actually looked at the statistics in terms of education in various states across the United States. And Oklahoma, I think, ranked 48th, 49th, or
Yes.
50th. That's worst, by the way. It's not 50th is best. It's always. I think I don't quite remember how it was measured, but it was trending towards the bottom. Now, in I was again reading through. I was watching one of your videos, and if I'm not wrong, you were initially, I think, in the state it's called the public system, and then you transferred at some point to the private system, where
Yes.
you were quite taken aback by the difference in education that was offered. So, can you just go through that story a bit, what you learned from it, and then hopefully that will lead to why you're so passionate about education now?
Absolutely. So I grew up in a public school. The middle of my sophomore year, I decided to transfer to a private high school. And that was honestly one of the best decisions I've ever made. Not only did it make me more prepared for college, but I was actually challenging myself in studies because I feel like at my public school, I wasn't growing um, as a student. I wasn't learning everything that I should be learning. And I would get bored in class. And when I would get bored in class, I wouldn't pay attention. And that led to just me not having the greatest experience there. And so being able to have the opportunity and have the funds to transfer schools truly changed my life and truly changed the way I feel about education. The resource disparity in public versus private schools, especially in the state of Oklahoma, which I'll get into in a second, but this was
Yep.
in Texas. Was amazing to me. I didn't learn how to write a research paper until my sophomore year of high school. When I transferred, they handed me a research paper and they said, okay, this is your topic. And I said, what's a research paper? Because I wasn't even
Wow.
introduced to
Yep.
that topic until I transferred. But in Oklahoma, we are ranked 48th in the nation for education and 46th in the nation for education spending on a
Hmm.
statewide level. And that's really sad to see because we don't do enough to educate our generations that are coming up. Because with these new evolutions of now, we need to start teaching financial literacy, we need to start teaching
Mm.
STEM and tech. There's so many new fields that we have yet to dive into and discover that students need. You know, these
Yep.
students need STEAM classes. These students need financial literacy classes, especially with the new NIL deals that are happening at college. So there's so many opportunities that go unseized because people don't have the resources to do so. Well, my question is, who decided that English, math, science, and history was the four studies that you need to study? Like, who decided that? Because there's so much more to education and there's so much more to life whenever you expand your horizons. I think foreign language should be required for every single student. I'm in college, I'm in Spanish 2 right now, and it is kicking my butt, let me tell you. I wish I had the opportunity to learn Spanish at such a younger age so then it could be something that I could grow with and I could grow up, you know, learning more about the language and the culture. Instead, now I sit in this class and I'm having the hardest time learning how to
Mm.
conjugate, learning how to form sentence structures correctly, because, you know, the more your brain develops, the more it fossilizes. And so I think getting foreign language and STEAM classes into younger kids earlier, put it in elementary schools, that's something that will help them grow. Being bilingual is something that, you know, happens in so many other countries. I have a lot of classes with African exchange students who come over to the United States and they know Somalian, they know English, and then they also know either German or French. So I
Mm.
think that's amazing how they know three languages, yet here in the United States, we really only speak one. So that's just a little bit on the international stage, what the resource disparity is and what the, you know, language barrier is, because we could be so much smarter and more much developed as a nation if we just learned how to use a second language.
Now, in terms of the curriculum, so English, math, science, and I think you said history, it's slightly different over here, but it's much the same. Certainly English, maths, and science. Um, and in terms of when it was decided, I have to think way, way back, even before. I
Yeah.
don't know, like maybe turn of the century. The school system as it exists was originally developed when we were still having giant manufacturing plants, and everyone was told to sit down, shut up, you do what you're told, you don't talk to your neighbor because that's disruptive. And it was designed to make people as great workers as possible. But in this day and age, life is changing so rapidly. I don't know how much you've kept up with technological advances. You talk about STEM. I mean, AI, artificial intelligence. I mean, the whole
There's
chat
now AI
GPT thing.
systems that will write papers for you. A lot of my
Oh,
like
yeah.
sorority sisters use like this chat GPT, type in a
Yep.
question and it has a whole
Yep.
essay prepared. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What are you learning
Yeah.
from that?
You're not learning anything from it. That's it. So that's actually just come out with a new. It was version 3.5. Version 4 is is orders of magnitude smarter than what probably your peers were using. You can give it visual inputs now, and tell it to change it or what's going on to describe it. You can get it to write a 20,000 word essay or dissertation and not know anything about the topic. Now, again, like any other tool, there's a place for it, and AI, look, it's out of the bottle. It's not going to go back in because it can make you so much more productive. But in terms of, see, I think because AI's come out and it's going to be such a game changer, you need to learn about it. You do.
Absolutely.
You need to learn about financial literacy, because otherwise you're going to go broke, and we're heading for difficult financial times. I don't think it's going to get easier anytime soon. So you need to learn how to do a tax return. You need to learn the basic grammar, how to add. You need to learn how to speak, present, all that stuff. And then learning history, to me, because I never liked history, because I always thought of it as, well, why am I going to need to learn the certain date of this happen? Especially in this day and age, you can look it up. Like half a second, I can now look it up and say, when did it happen? It happened at this point. But how do you see that changing? Because politics in general is not known for keeping up with the times. No. It tends to lag until it reaches a threshold where it's like, oh, it's a crisis. We've got to do something. And then eventually they do something. And it's normally, even when they do it, it's not great because they don't really know what they're talking about. Now, you're interested in politics. You're passionate about education. Do you honestly see this changing to a system where politics can, because politics decides the education system in terms of what you're going to learn, can we really get to a point where politics get ahead of the game and say, well, this is the way the world's heading, so this is what we need the young people to learn now?
You know, in my fantasy world where everything's perfect, yes. However,
sure.
In reality, it's probably not going to happen in the ways that we want it to happen, but it all starts on the local level of creating change. Start with your school boards. Start with getting them intrigued, showing them research, showing them numbers, and then they're more willing to fund these projects and these startups to test it out, see if it works in your school, see if it works in your community. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to work for everyone. There is no one cookie cutter fit for every single child. And I truly believe that here in the United States, the standardized testing systems have gone rampant. And it's something I've never loved, because you can't tell me that my whole high school and middle school experience is based on one SAT or one ACT score. I know I am smarter than the SAT or ACT score that I got. And so my first step, if being, in this high power of creating change in education, would be to get rid of standardized testing. I think we should do assessment testing instead, where we assess how much our students are learning. We assess what they are learning and what they're not learning, and go from there. Because then once we have that data, we can truly start building a new system on top of that. Because the system we have right now, yes, it might have worked 100 years ago, but it's broken. It's not working anymore. And we need to do something to fix it before it's too late to fix it, before it's too late to educate on all of these important topics that are coming. So now, we see the rise of more people not coming to college, and we see the rise of, all of these independent jobs that you can do without getting a college degree. And that's great. However, we're not preparing, these students to go out to get these jobs. We're not preparing them in high school so that they can be successful in doing that. And we need to start doing that. We need to start preparing every single student, whether it is starting in elementary school or starting in high school or starting in college, to be successful for life and to be successful for their careers, because no one child is the same and no one child learns the same. I mentioned earlier, my grandma went to teach teachers how to teach impoverished students. My grandma grew up in extreme poverty. So she knows firsthand the struggles that she went through and the struggles that kids in her community went through. So that made her so much more equipped to teach teachers, because you can't, look at someone who comes from wealth, who comes from money, who comes from resources, and compare them to a child who comes from nothing and expect them to learn the same way. They need there's different curriculums for each child, to even just bringing that child from poverty up to the resource level that the child with money has. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that break down the education system.
Well, let's just focus on the standardized testing for a second, because I've interviewed a few teachers, and as I said, I was studying to become one, and then I just felt like I wouldn't be able to have the impact that I wanted to if I went into the school system. But I have not spoken to a single teacher who is in favor of standardized testing. Not one. And I think that says an awful lot. So But I want to ask you from your perspective, because you just have been through school, high school, obviously now you're in college. So did you sit through the standardized test yourself?
I did. I sat through the STAR test, which is the Texas
Okay.
State Standardized Test. And then I sat through that between the third grade to my sophomore year of high school. And then when I transferred, private schools don't do standardized tests. It kind of depends on where you're at.
Right. Okay. But I'm just curious from your perspective, what do you feel you learnt? What was your experience with the standardized test? Because in theory, it's to measure where the students are up to, and then if they're behind, to bring them up to speed. So in theory, that sounds great. Everyone would be in favor of that. Like if you're struggling, we're going to help you. But the reality of it just doesn't seem, whether it's in the States or even here in Australia, it just doesn't seem to work like that. I'm just curious, what was your experience with standardized testing as a student?
I never had a good standardized test experience. I am not a standardized test taker. Like, that is not how I learn. That's not who I am. And my knowledge is not defined by the number that comes out. I always struggled with standardized testing because they try to trick you. And in the real world, that's not going to try to trick you, whenever you take a step back and really think about it in that terms. And standardized testing, I feel like, gives a lot of teachers the opportunity to be lazy with their students. It gives teachers the
Mm,
opportunity to just teach the test instead of teaching beyond the test, teaching kids to think critically, to form their own opinions, to form, what they believe in because they are taught so strictly, A means this, B means this, C means this, D means this, pick the best answer. And that's just not how learning works.
yeah, it seems like standardized testing is something that really has to change because the teachers don't like it, the students
No.
don't seem to like it. So I'm not sure why it's still around, let's be honest. But it comes down to politics, doesn't it? Because the politicians are the one who's going to have to change it. I mean, you're interested in politics. How did that begin? Because what I've noticed is probably 20, 30 years ago, most young people weren't interested in politics, and I certainly wasn't. But sort of moving into the 2010s, the 2020s, I have become more and more interested in politics just because it seems to be so much more relevant. And I think you can see the what happens if you don't take an active interest in it. And I think as citizens, we should all take an active interest in what's happening in our country. Australia, so that you know, we have compulsory voting. We just had a state election. You have to vote. If you don't vote, then you're actually fined for not voting. Obviously, that's not the case in the United States. But how did you get involved in politics, and why are you so interested in politics at your age?
I have always been interested in politics. Like, I was the 5-year-old at the table who loved to cause controversy. So as soon as I learned how to Google things, um,
Right.
I could tell you about all the major Supreme Court cases at that time, and it was crazy for a 5-year-old, to bring that stuff up at the dinner table. I was asked to leave multiple times, but you know what? That's okay because everyone has to start somewhere. And I always knew I wanted to make a change, and I knew I wasn't going to do that just getting, you know going through life and not trying to make an impact everywhere I went. So I was able to start a mock trial team at my
Mhm.
first high school. And I think that also really sparked my interest in law. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to combine politics and law. What's next? Well, I started listening to some podcasts. I got involved with Turning Point USA over here in America. I've been involved with them for the past 2 years, and I've learned a lot just sitting back and listening from politicians. I've learned a lot about what I would like to do and what I would not like to do,
Mhm.
and just taking an interest in the things that make our society great. It is a civil right, it is a civil privilege to vote. It is
Mm.
our civil responsibility as Americans to vote for our next electors. However, there is such a rise in political apathy right now. My generation is the generation of change, and I'm very proud to be a part of Generation Z. We're seeing so many social movements, but we're also seeing a complete disregard for politics and a complete disregard for change because
Mhm.
everyone's like, my voice doesn't matter. My voice doesn't make a change. Every vote matters. Every voice makes a change. It's just how you choose to, use that voice to make a change. So right now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm getting my bachelor's degree. I hope to take a 2-year gap year, and then I want to go obtain my constitutional law degree and then work as a political advisor, work in politics, seeing, all the backhanded deals, everything that goes behind closed doors. And I think something that has really inspired me is wanting to be a transparent communicator between what is happening in the legislature, what is happening in the White
Ooh,
House, what is
okay.
happening in
Yeah.
the judicial offices with the
Yeah.
people, because we don't understand half the things that is happening unless you
No.
know legal jargon, unless
Yeah.
you know all the little back room
Yeah.
websites to go and check. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what our taxpayer dollars are going to spend.
Yeah.
And personally, I have seen so many things I don't like with the government in the past 10 years of my life. And I'm 20,
Hmm.
so I've been keeping up with this stuff since I was 10 years old, and so many things that I want to make a change in. And so it all starts with girls like me. It all starts with people like me getting into it at a young age, promoting, going out to the polls to vote, promoting critical thinking. Because I think that's something here in America we struggle with. We struggle to think critically about what we want and what we believe. Instead, we've become lazy and we'll, watch
You
a political news
sure.
anchor, and we'll start believing whatever they believe and whatever they say is law. And that's not how it should be. And that's something I've also noticed in my place of education, in my institution. They are teaching, more to one political party instead of saying neutral. And so I've had
Mm,
fights with my teachers over my
good.
political views. Yeah, exactly. And I've had fights. I had a teacher try to fail me one time because of my political views. And he actually told me, he's like, you know what? I grade your kind, your kind
Excuse me?
easier. And I said,
You
excuse,
use
that
those words. Your
Yes,
kind.
your kind. I was one of two sides of the political spectrum, one of two
Yeah.
people in the political spectrum that I believe in that class out of a class of 28 people. So it really just ended up in everyone yelling at the two of us for having an opinion, but we also weren't going to let them walk all over us. It
Mm,
all starts with people standing up for what they believe in, forming their own opinions, and then aligning with the party, not the person. I think
mhm.
that's another really important thing when it comes to elections. You might not like whoever is running for your party. However, look at their policies that they want to create. Look at their track records, because if they are going to come into office, they need to make sure that they spend that time creating change, making things happen, going straight into action. However, I just feel like recently we haven't seen a lot of that, and I'm ready for some change. I'm ready to see the change I've always wanted to see in the United States. So I think it all starts with me. I think it all starts with our generation, and it all starts on the individual level as well.
You look like you're
Sorry, I
about
get
to
really
jump out.
passionate about it.
I couldn't tell at all. Do you still get asked to leave the dinner table?
No, thankfully not. Because I've learned how to control my opinions as I've gotten older. Because a lot of times when I was little, it was like my way or the highway.
Yeah,
And now it all also a huge thing when it comes to politics is respect, having respect for the other side, letting them
exactly.
create a good solid argument, but also coming back with a good solid argument in a respectful way.
Mm,
Respect is something that we've lost over the past 4 years, is something that has been very evident in the United States. And I think that's something we really need to bring back. Like everyone needs to listen to the song RESPECT just to learn a little something.
yeah, look, respect has gone out the window. I think critical thinking is not something that's only lacking in the States. I think it's lacking in a lot of Western countries.
Yeah.
Social media could have a role to play in that, which we covered already. Critical debate. See, to me, I love a good debate, but I was taught debate is about you debate the argument. You don't debate the person. And
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to law, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but the ad hominem argument where you attack the person's character versus attacking their argument is the worst. It's like if you were a lawyer and you did that, you'd be sacked because that goes
Yeah.
completely out the window. It doesn't fly. But we seem to live in a world where I can't believe that your teacher literally used the words "your kind." I think that's despicable.
It
And
is.
I do have a giant issue. I don't want to put the education system to be skewed either way in terms of political leaning. I understand and respect that. Obviously, everyone will have their own political leaning, but surely, as an educator, your primary responsibility is to teach your students how to think and to form their own opinions and to reason how they've come to their opinions. Not just, oh, I believe this because that person told me. It's like, no, well, why? Do you actually agree with the basis they made their case on? And do you agree with that? Because if not, then why are you agreeing with them? But that's a I can't believe that your teacher, really, your
Yeah. It was
kind?
my first semester of my college experience, like first class with this guy,
Oh
first
my God.
Tuesday, and I'm already terrified for my classes. And he's like, "You're kind." And I'm like, "Okay, I either drop now and let him win, or I
Yeah.
stay in this class and I prove him wrong." And so it was a political satire class, and it was a writing class as well. So I let my political satire really fly through that class.
It was a political satire class. And in that one, he's. I'm sorry. This is like borderline. It's almost like a joke. It's like April Fool's Day, a political satire class, and he can't deal with the fact that someone might have a different political opinion to his own, and he labels his students as your kind. Seriously. Well, how did that class go for the rest of the semester?
I ended up getting an A in that class, and I
Good for
worked
you.
really, really, really hard for that A because I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure he could not attack my argument. I used
There you
every
go.
single
There you
book
go.
that I could find that would back my
Yeah.
argument. I used every single scholarly article I could find. And so, like, my resource list on all of my papers were at least 2 pages long because I
Oh.
wanted to make sure he knew where I was getting my information.
Yeah.
I wasn't crazy. And so I worked really hard in that class, and I'm very thankful I did because I learned a lot about myself. And it taught me at the very beginning to never give up and to never stop fighting for what I believe in.
Well, I think also not to let people look down on you, particularly as a young girl going through that. It'd be very easy because there's a power imbalance inherent in the system in that situation. You got a teacher, you got a student, he's older, you're younger, male, female, and it'd be very easy to just laugh it off and say, "Oh no, I was just pretending," which I wouldn't blame anyone because who wants to sit in
No,
class and be attacked?
exactly.
But you took the harder route, but I would say I mean, look, kudos to you. I love the fact that you got an A.
Thank you.
And let's bring it back to the fact that you're the girl who struggled with SATs, yet you were able to, let's call it what it is, put a teacher in his place, which
Exactly.
did that. I mean, that must have felt kind of good.
Oh,
Really,
I felt
like,
great. I'm not gonna lie. I've
yeah.
never felt better. I was like, four, let's go. And now I just don't recommend that teacher to anyone who tries to take him. I left him a bad review on Rate My Professor. Rate My Professor is a great college tool for everyone who goes to college or is going to college out there.
I didn't know that was. I thought you were going to say I left him a bad review on Yelp, and I was like, oh, is Yelp giving college reviews now? Um, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, right? Because you said a lot of good stuff, but now I don't believe this, but I know there's going to be some people out there, older people, let's say, male and female, who will say, all right, this Haleigh girl, she's got ideals, but she's young and she hasn't seen what the real world is like. Give her 10 years, 20 years, and she's not going to be thinking like this because she hasn't had enough experience in the real world. And look, as we get older, all of us will, I wouldn't say, well, we change, we modify, adapt our beliefs, but that's natural, and we grow and we have more considered opinions. But what would you say to someone who dismisses you as just being, let's say, young and naive, and maybe just an optimist?
Yeah, I tell them that it's their loss, because I truly believe I'm going to make a change one day. And if they can't see it now, that's fine. That doesn't hurt my feelings. That's not going to derail me because I
Hmm.
know who I am and I know what I believe and what my values are. And so when things do happen and when things do happen where I'm able to make a change, I want to look back at all the people who told me I couldn't do this and be like, yes, yes, I did this. And, in pageantry, I've kind of endured that a lot. When I was in seventh grade, I won my first ever state title after 5 years of competing. I was
Wow.
13 years old. I just won the IJM Texas junior team title. I was so excited. I was the youngest girl in my age division, wasn't expecting anything out of it. And a judge came up to me and they said, "You know what, Haleigh, if you don't fix your speech impediment, you will go nowhere in life. And you weren't my favorite." And then left. He said that in front of me, in front of my mom, in front of my coach. And we're all like looking at each other like, what just happened? Did this grown man literally come up to me and tell me that I was not going to go anywhere in life because of my speech? Next Tuesday, I was in speech therapy. I fixed my speech impediment in 6 months when everyone told me it would take about 2 years to fix. So I was so dedicated and I was so determined to make that change. And that's something that is always going to stay with me. That dedication to
Mm.
make change will always be with me. So I look back at that moment as a huge turning point in my life.
I don't understand what sort of grown man does that. I don't
No,
understand what planet you come from that you would take. Why would you take the time to do something like that? I
I
don't
don't know.
understand. I really don't. I feel sorry for him because obviously something is not like there's something going on with him. If you feel like you get some sort of power trip or validation from telling her what you were 13, like
13-year
I,
old.
even if you were 30, it doesn't matter
Yeah,
the age. It's just like why would you say that? That's not
it's common
helpful at all.
decency.
Well, it comes back to respect, doesn't it? Respect and manners, which I think are very undervalued in this day and
So
age. Um,
undervalued.
let's now. Initially, you reached out to me because I asked about sorority, and I do want to get to sorority. So for me, see, I started in pageantry. To cut a long story short, I went into pageantry, interviewing pageant girls because I didn't know anything about pageantry. And bear in mind, I'm in Australia. It's certainly not the south of the United States where pageantry everyone knows about it. Here in Australia, it's like, what's a pageant? Oh, you mean Miss Congeniality? Oh, toddlers and tiaras. I'm like, I don't know. But see, I didn't like forming beliefs or opinions until I'd actually done my research, done my work. So I started
Absolutely.
interviewing pageant girls and found out actually it's not what a lot of people think. Now, when it comes to sorority, the reason I wanted to start talking to people who are in sorority is because I don't know anything about sororities, but what I've noticed is the big overlap, huge overlap between the girls in sororities and the girls in pageantry. So I guess at a start, could you tell people pretend they know nothing about sororities, which wouldn't be far from the truth for myself. But what is a sorority? Like, what does it do?
So, in my opinion, a sorority is a network of girls who are like-minded, who are in college to make connections, in college to leave with lifelong friends, and also to grow personally and professionally. Being in a sorority, I've been able to make so many networking connections, but I've also grown so much as a person because they push me to do things I wouldn't normally do. So right now, I'm the vice president of risk management for Pi Beta Phi at the University of Oklahoma. So basically, if you get in trouble, you have to come and see me, and we talk it out. I decide what your punishment is based on what the bylaws say, and that's kind of how my position runs. But I also oversee social events. I oversee our policy and prevention education. So every educational thing that we send our members to is all through Pi Phi. And it's something I've grown a lot from because it's something I want to do. I'm very passionate about risk management because it's taught me a lot about litigation and reading contracts and making sure, we're following our contracts all at the same time because I'm going to need that whenever I go to law school.
Oh yeah.
But I originally rushed at the University of Oklahoma because I wanted to make friends and I wasn't sure what I was going to be involved in or where,
Okay, back
you
me
know,
up for a sec. So
yeah.
Rush, this is one of the things that I need to know. So I guess the next question was going to be, how do you join a sorority? Because I've heard Rush, and there's something else. I think I was speaking to Bailey Guy, and she was telling me, and Isabella Bladorn, and they've all said these things like that you're little, and like Isabella was in
Yes.
a box and she burst out, and that was my little, and I'm like, little Rush, what's you're hiding in a
Yeah.
box? What's going on? So how do you what's the process of joining a sorority? Because as I
Okay.
understand, like there's a recruitment day or something like that.
It's a recruitment week for
Okay.
us at OU. And also, I know it is at Bama. My roommate at Miss Teen USA was Kylan Darnell, Alabama Rush TikTok girl. Love that girl. However, whenever you go through Rush Week, you will start by going to every single house on campus. We call this open house round. And so you'll
Right.
rotate at OU, there's 11. So we rotated through all 11 of the houses the first 2 days of recruitment. And then we
Wow.
personally rank what houses we like the best to what houses we didn't like at all. So it's on a scale of 1 to 11, and then we cut the first the three that we didn't like. However, the
Okay.
sororities are also ranking you based on your resume, on your GPA, on a personality score. There's a lot that goes into everything on the sorority side. So they do all the lists and stuff. And so if you don't make that sorority's cut, then they won't be on your schedule. So they'll bring up someone who
Yep.
you tried to cut back onto your schedule, or you could potentially have less than 8 houses on the second day.
Right.
It really just depends. And then you go to the second round, which is called philanthropy. So every sorority has the opportunity to present their philanthropy with all of the P&Ms or potential new members coming through the recruitment process.
Right.
And so ours is Read, Lead, Achieve, which is all about childhood literacy at Pi Phi. And that's one reason why I wanted to go Pi Phi, because I love education. And so we were able to share that love with our P&Ms. And then from there, the pool gets smaller. So you'll rank from 8, you'll rank your top 5. The next day, you'll have sisterhood round. And then you'll go and visit, do house tours, speak with girls for a longer amount of time. speak with girls on a lot of different topics that, involve a lot of things that you do with your sisters in the house.
Mm.
And then you'll finally cut down to the final two for pref night. And so pref night is a really long night. They do some rituals depending on what sorority you're in. And you spend a lot of time talking to multiple different people about, your personality, what makes you you, why you want to be in this sorority, what would make you a good fit. So after all of that is said and done, you'll go and rank your first and your second choice. At OU, you're
Right.
guaranteed a house if you rank a first and a second choice. So I'll
Okay.
either get my first choice or I'll get my second choice. But I will say everything works out in the end. You just have to trust the process. A lot of
Mm.
people quit rush in the middle because their top house that they wanted cut them. However,
Yeah.
when I went through recruitment, I didn't think I was going to be a Pi Phi. I thought I was going to be in another house. My mom went to OU, so I thought I was going to be, a legacy in her house, but I just ended up not finding, my fit there. I
Yeah.
personally did not like it as much as Pi Phi, and that's completely okay.
Mm.
You can be your own person in Rush, and you don't have to get upset if someone cuts you just because, at the end of the day, you're going to end up exactly where you're supposed to end up. I truly believe in that. So just trust the process would be my biggest advice for anyone going through recruitment. But finally, there's Bid Day. And Bid Day is just a really big celebration. How we do it here is our ROGAMs, or the girls who are not affiliated with the sorority that week but are in sororities, pass out T-shirts and information. So they knock on the doors of the dorm and they give the girls the T-shirts. And then you'll put on your T-shirt and you'll just start running. You will run to the house and you'll run home. And so you'll have like a temporary big or your bid day big there with your sign. And so you run,
Right.
and it's usually someone who you talk to during recruitment, and you give them like this
Right.
huge hug, and then everyone takes photos. It's this big celebration. We went and played pickleball after mine. So we got to do a lot of fun things
Hmm.
like right after, you
Yeah.
get the bid, and then you have your information stuff, and then you start the whole sorority process from there.
Right. That's a lot of information to
It's a
take
lot of
in.
information.
And that all takes place within a week.
But then, that's just the P&M side of it. So that's just the recruitment week.
Right.
However, sororities prep for 2.5 weeks for that 1 week. So we have already gone through something called Greek Preview Day, and that is basically a mock rush for seniors in high school coming to OU, and it's just the opportunity for them to get some nerves out about what formal recruitment will look like. But
Right.
for us, we come to school 2 weeks early to start prepping. We prep on what we talk about. We have conversation workshops. We, learn the fun bumping or like the dance songs, or you sing songs. And there's so many different things and aspects that go into it that you wouldn't realize until you're in that moment and you're there.
Yeah. And so when how do you each sorority, it sounds like, stands for something quite different, and they must have different things that they advocate for, correct?
Yes. So
Right.
each
And you're
sorority will have a different type of girl that they want, or a different type
right.
of philanthropy that they support.
And you said at OU there's 11 houses?
There's 11.
Right. So can you give me an idea as to what are some of the things that the other houses stand for? So yours is very much based on literacy, which makes a lot of sense in terms of what you're passionate about. What do some of the other houses, what do they advocate for?
So we have Tridelt right across the lawn, and theirs is St. Jude's Children's Hospital.
Okay.
Alpha Chi Omega, which is, very close to Pi Phi. They are domestic violence awareness.
Hmm.
We have Kappa Kappa Gamma, who is mental health. Um, we have Alpha Gamma Delta, who's food insecurity. And those are the ones I can remember right off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
that's
I would
enough.
have to like
Yeah, that's. I
dig
don't
for a
expect you to
while.
remember all of them. I mean, you found your home. That's all that matters. And just to clarify me, big and little, is it like the? I mean, to bring it full circle, is it like the big sisters, kind of like a mentor? So, like, I imagine like you're a year ahead and you're mentoring someone who's a year below.
Yes. So how we do it and how a lot of other sororities do it, you take the freshmen on temp dates. So you'll like meet them, you'll go get Sonic drinks or shakes, or like go on a little hot girl walk or whatever, your jazz is. And you'll get to meet these girls one on one or in a group setting if you want to.
Yeah.
And then from there, we do determine the relationship, or DTR. And so that's when a little comes to a big and they're like, I want you to be my big. And you're like, yes. Or I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, I already have a big, I mean, I already have a little, however,
Yeah.
you should really meet my friend, so and so. I went to high school with my little, however, we weren't very close in high school, but whenever we came to college, she's one of my best friends now. I absolutely adore her. And so I knew I wanted her as my little, and she always wanted me as my big. So I got really lucky with that. So I got to pop out of the box and yell, surprise, it's me.
Is that like the tradition? Because I thought that
Yes.
but bursting out of a box was just like Isabella was. So that's what everyone. That's how you meet your big, is they have to hide in a box.
Well, some, we do a PJ themed, and so we hide in the box, and it's like we're presents. However, I know like a lot of other sororities will like do like fun themes. Like there's
Yeah.
like pageant queens, there's the like all the Food Network stars. Like it just really depends on like what your big is feeling. I've seen like salt and pepper shakers, Lego people. Like there is so many different aspects that you could do. However, we just kind of keep ours simple. You go get a box from Home Depot, you wrap it up in paper, and you
Okay.
just sit inside of it.
Sometimes the simplest options in life are the best. That must be a manic week, I guess, for the sorority itself. It'd be like more like a manic month, but that week must be crazy, no?
Yeah, it is insane. Tensions are high. Emotions are through the roof because if you don't sleep during recruitment week, like you don't sleep at all pretty much. So you are going from day in to day out. You're spending every single moment with these girls. So you have to do what's best for yourself, even if that means like going around this back of the house, taking a quick little walk, clearing your head, because emotions can get really high, especially if you
I can
get
imagine.
really attached to a girl and then they
Yeah,
cut you or something
yeah,
happens and then it's like, dang it, they're not back for day two.
yeah. But it's good preparation for life, because
Yes.
life often doesn't work out the way we want. You just said a hot girl walk. What's a hot girl walk? I've not heard of a hot girl walk. But obviously, I've not been on one before because I'm neither hot nor a girl. But what's a hot girl walk?
I feel like it's such a trend now because you see so many girls outside walking or like even just walking on the treadmill, like, oh, I'm getting my exercise in. I'm doing the hot girl walk, just getting ready for summer or just wanting to stay healthy. And so it's literally just girls walking. And it's a term that I feel like we created over COVID, where it's like, okay, I'm going to go outside and get my hot girl walk on. So, although
I feel like this is a section they should introduce into pageants. The hot girl walk
hot girl
section.
walk. Yes,
So,
instead of fitness, replace it. Hot girl walk.
so do you have to do this kind of
Oh
strut, or
no.
is it okay just to walk? All right.
I thought I would jazz it up a little bit, add a little shoulders in there, but you can normally walk. You can walk normally.
I feel like I've learned a lot. When it comes to sororities, as I understand, you are is it a soror for life? So, well, once you've joined a sorority, it
Mhm.
doesn't end once you leave college. You're then an alumna, and
Yes.
then you are. Someone said it's a soror. I don't know, a member of the sorority for life. So, is that what happens?
Yeah, I mean, there is so many alumni clubs that we are so fortunate to have here in Oklahoma that support a lot of our meals on the weekend because we don't get fed by the house on the weekends, who come in and they will fund a lot of our events. So having a great alumni base is really important, but also it's great for connections. I've
Yeah.
been able to connect with my alumni base and I've gotten to speak to a lot of schools that way just by reaching out to them, seeing if they have younger children and making that connection to go and speak to schools. Actually, my advisor for risk management, I spoke to her child's entire middle school. So that was something that was
Wow.
really special to me,
Yeah.
because I had that relationship with her before I even came into this position. So being in this position of a lot of responsibility, she has been able to not only just help me on a personal front, but help me so much professionally about understanding litigation and taking it to ways where I can comprehend it all.
And just one final question. I feel like there's so many questions I could ask because it's a whole new world to me. Um, the secret handshakes, or some, is that
We
a
do a hand
thing?
sign. No, we don't do handshakes. We have like hand
Okay,
signs. So like this is
okay.
you could do angels for Pi Phi. You could do we also do like halos. And then we used
Okay.
to also do chariots, like where you'd go like so there's a lot of different it's all for the Instagram, it's all for the photos, all for the
Or for the
memory.
gram. Halos, angels, hot girl walk. I feel like my brain is just swimming with all this new terminology that I think I feel like after this I'm going to go out and do my hot girl walk. Um, But just before we move to the close, because we've been on for over an hour, and I just want to be respectful of your time. Where do you see ideally? Where would you like to see yourself in the, let's say, the next? I mean, you're going to be in college a couple more years, and then maybe more. You said you had 2 year gap year. Play out the next five or so years in your life. Where would you like to end up?
So I have 2 more years left in my undergrad with a 1 to 2 year gap year, and then I'll spend 3 years in law school. So where I want to end up in life is just doing something I'm passionate about and doing something where I can truly make a change on a lot of different levels. Right now, I'm trying to find a great internship that will plug me in politically in the state of Oklahoma so I can start making
Hmm.
those connections. So where I see myself on my gap year is working with something in PR that has to do with the state of Oklahoma, or even
Hmm.
potentially, nationally working for a firm that represents politicians and just helping them on, the marketing and the social media side, and how to keep a clean social media, but also how to talk to the press in a very respectful way. So just all of that stuff before I get to go and actually start doing the law stuff. Because for me, I personally cannot go to school for 7 years straight after spending 12 years in school. So
Yeah.
I need a nice little break to go and grow myself professionally, mentally, also, accumulate some finances so I can start paying for my law school, because that's how a lot of people end up in debt, is they don't know how to responsibly save money and
Yeah.
spend money. So being able to, financially support myself through law school is a big goal of mine. So I plan to be working a lot over the next couple years, wherever the road might take me.
Sounds like you're going to be busy.
Yes. And that's how I like it. I don't like to be bored. I always like to be doing something. So
Well, it's much better than sitting at home scrolling the TikTok. Let's put it that way.
so true.
Now, just before we go to the final 10, so Sunny, who's the teacher that I interviewed in Oklahoma,
I
she
love
said
sunny
my
day.
Haleigh girl, and by state test, yeah, she's the one who she doesn't like. She's not a fan of standardized testing. I think she's
I got to
also.
speak to her class, and she is one
Oh
of the
wow,
most amazing teachers and one of the most inspirational teachers I have ever met. So, all kudos to Sunny. She is really making a difference in education.
she got Teacher of the Year.
She
It's
did, as the youngest teacher in her district.
Yeah, well, when you hear what the lengths that she'll go to help her students out, and also her backstory itself, it
Yes.
was amazing. I've heard a lot of different backstories, but hers really stick out. Okay, just before we do the final 10, any shout outs? Anyone that you want to give a shout out to, or Hot Girl Walk, or
I would really like to give a shout out to my parents for always pushing me to be the person I am and to always instilling that confidence in me at a very young age. And a big shout out to all of my Pi Phi sorority sisters, doing this for y'all guys. I love every single one of them, and they've all deeply impacted me. So if you're not sure about joining a sorority, do it, because the worst thing that can happen is you drop out. It's it's not permanent, it's not forever unless you want it to be forever. So very fortunate for everything. And also a big thank you to you for having me on this amazing show. I'm so honored to be here.
absolutely. I mean, when it comes to sororities, I think it's like anything else in life. Give it a go. Well,
Exactly. Why
I mean,
not? Just
you
like
know,
doing a pageant. Why not?
exactly. Okay. Well, the final 10 were random final 10 to wrap up. So, number one, what is your favorite word?
Oh, wow. Slay. Slay is probably my most used word, but I think it's just because I live with a bunch of girls who say it all the time.
So, I imagine you mean slay queen, not
Like
like
Slay
the
Queen.
sleigh behind reindeers, not
No,
that
no,
slay.
like Slay
Okay.
Queen.
Okay. Got that. Number two, what is your least favorite word?
Honestly, any profanity, I don't like hearing it. I don't like seeing it written on posts or anything, especially as a wrist share. Big no no for me.
Absolutely. Okay. Number three, in life, what gets you excited? What turns you on?
Just, looking out the window and seeing it's a pretty day and seeing it's a new day to conquer anything. I think that's one thing that gets me out of bed.
And what turns you off?
People who constantly feel like they have to put other people down to make themselves feel successful.
Number five, what sound or noise do you love?
I love the sound of rain. However, I hate the sound of thunder.
Okay. So we need rain, but no thunderstorm.
Yes.
Got it. Number six, what sound or noise do you hate?
Like nails on a chalkboard, anything really screechy and staticky.
if you could have any one superpower, what would you pick and why?
I would pick to transport places. I feel like I want to be everywhere all at once. So just being able to like cross my arms and then poof, I'm there. That'd be great.
And also save a lot on travel costs. I can tell you
Yes,
that much as
gas
someone from
money.
Australia. Well, that too, yes, gas costs. Number 8, what job would you most like to attempt?
I would love to be the United States press secretary.
Number 9, what job would you definitely not like to attempt?
Anything that has been shown on Dirty Jobs. Honestly, those just anything that has me getting dirty, I'm very clean girl, very much like germaphobe. So anything that has to do with any of that is just a no for me.
So working in the sewage is not
That's
happening.
that's not happening. I'm sorry.
Have you heard of fatbergs?
No.
Don't know if you want to. That in the sewage beneath the cities, you can imagine how much grease accumulates, and when the grease solidifies, all sorts of things get stuck in it. And underneath in the sewage, there are people whose job literally is to dislodge these giant, like 1,000-pound, 2,000-pound fatbergs that have solidified and are clogging up the arteries of the city. So no. I sent people photos of that and they become traumatized. So I just want to clarify.
Please don't send me one. Please don't send me one.
That's not block on social media. All right, so that's not happening. Final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Wow, this is like kind of an emotional question. I would just like him to say, I'm so proud of you, my daughter. Thank you for doing all of your work on earth for me. Like, thank you for doing all of your work, but showing me through you. I think that would be the most rewarding words to hear. If, we even make it to heaven, if I am deemed worthy, that's something that I would love to hear from him.
Beautiful. And just a final question from me as someone who read the Bible last year. Do you have a favorite Bible verse or favorite Bible book?
The book of Daniel is probably my overall favorite. I think he's one of the most transpiring characters in the Bible, especially with all the trials and tribulations that he went through, and all that he overcome to just show his love for the Lord. And I think that's something that's really inspiring and everyone should, take from.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, Haleigh, that's about it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you.
I can't wait, honestly, to see what you do. That story about, that teacher that you had that said you're kind and then you put him in his place. We want more energy like that in the world, even with the hot girl walks and all that stuff.
Exactly. It's just the beginning.
No, I think that's you're an amazing role model for young women doing something like that. I don't say that to everyone, but being able to do something like that.
I really appreciate that.
That's amazing. Best of luck with everything you do. I hope to see you as White House press secretary sometime. Don't know when.
One day. One day
in the next few years, I can say I know her. She's a girl who does a hot girl walk. Does a White House press secretary do a hot girl? I
feel like Kayleigh McEnany did a hot girl walk, so that's all I can ask for.
We can hope. All right. Well, Haleigh, I'll keep you on the line for just a sec whilst I hang up with the audience. But thanks to everyone for watching live on the replay, and we will speak to you next time. Bye-bye for now. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Sorority Access is now open. So if you'd like to join an amazing group of women and learn how to be the most powerful, confident, and impactful queen possible, head to thepageantsorority.com. I'll see you there and see you in the next video.